This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. This episode is sponsored by C-School, the online school for creativity training. If you'd like to unleash your creative potential and access a free Creativity Blueprint training series, then just head over to c.school. That's www.c.school for your free training series. In today's episode, I speak with Dr. Diane Hamilton, and we talk about personality assessments, emotional intelligence, and developing a curiosity mindset. Enjoy this episode.
Hi, it's James Taylor here, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Dr. Diane Hamilton. Diane Hamilton is an award-winning speaker, nationally syndicated radio host, author, and educator. She is the former MBA Program Chair at the Forbes School of Business and has taught more than 1,000 business courses. Meanwhile, as a keynote speaker, her talks address employee relations, engagement, productivity, and conflict resolution, and her latest book is called It's Not You, It's Your Personality. And it's my great pleasure to have Diane join us today. So welcome, Diane.
Well, thank you. It's so wonderful to be here.
So share with everyone what's going on in your world just now.
Oh, there's a lot. I'm always pretty busy. As you mentioned, I have my nationally syndicated radio show, and I'm writing my fourth book. It's about curiosity. I'm very interested in that. I still do a lot of speaking, a lot of consulting, and I'm still teaching quite a few courses I still teach at the Forbes School of Business and multiple other schools. So I keep pretty busy.
And that subject of curiosity that's a really fascinating one. I saw recently you tweeted out it was an infographic by a friend of mine, Nick Skillicorn from Ideas to Value, and it's about how we see levels of creativity decline in the States. It's called the fourth grade slump.
Right.
And you just kind of you were tweeting out about that as well. So is curiosity the same? Do you see those kind of levels of curiosity decline as we get older as well?
It's kind of interesting because if you look at some of the research, mindset and some of the famous books that have looked at what happens when you're young, of what we're told and how things impact us, we do tend to lose some of that curiosity. There's not a lot of great research out there. I'd like to see more about what happens and why. And that's why I started doing my research into this book. And I keep getting down these rabbit holes because you get so interesting, you just want to find out more. And I'm fascinated how it ties into emotional intelligence, engagement. There's so many areas to explore that definitely keeps me busy researching it. But I think a lot is, the way we're raised and what we're taught of what whether to have a fixed or closed mindset, as we read about in Mindset. But it's very complicated because it's very kind of hard to measure it.
Yeah.
There's openness to experience and all that from the Big Five, but just trying to really put your finger on exactly, to quantify it and measure it and to see how it's going to increase or decrease, it's pretty challenging.
Yeah. I'm going to be speaking in your part of the world in Arizona very soon, and I'm speaking about creativity and artificial intelligence. And some of the artificial intelligence engineers, they say one of the reasons why it's so difficult to build artificial intelligence at the level of creativity and curiosity and you have an emotional kind of dimension to them, is it's so difficult to put your finger at what that actually means and what that is to define that thing.
I agree. And it's interesting that you mentioned putting your finger on it, because I interviewed Hugh Chang, who was talking about how he had to create the code for computers to be able to actually physically touch a screen, because the touch of a screen is also a hard thing to get out of computers. So there's certain things that you have challenges with trying to put your finger on what it is and how to replicate it.
So where did it all begin for you? You've now taught over 1,000 business courses. You ran the MBA program there at Forbes. Syndicated radio host. Where did it all begin? Where did this kind of fascination in leadership and in emotional intelligence? Where did it start for you?
Well, it's I started in sales from, I was in more than 30 years. So I learned a lot of marketing and connecting and a lot of things in that experience. But for, my bachelor's and master's and PhD are all in business management. And I was very interested in, I don't know, maybe I'm a control freak. I like to have the ability to manage my life and whatever. And I think that kind of drew me into management to begin with. But as far as getting into emotional intelligence, that was something I hadn't even considered until I was writing my doctoral dissertation. And I was more interested in figuring out what impacted sales performance at the time, because there was just, it was be wonderful if you could predict whether this person would be great in sales or not, before you hired them. And I was trying to look at different factors. And at the time, I mean, Daniel Goldman had written his book quite a bit before that, because he wrote it in 95, but it hadn't really been around in me or around people I knew that much that I had really known that much about it. And so when I started researching it, I got interested in his work, but I also got interested in Reuben because he had a really interesting assessment that I liked. Was kind of more geared towards sales, in my opinion, because it had stress management and some of these other things. And I thought it was kind of fascinating to see how each of the researchers kind of looked at emotional intelligence in a little bit different light. They have it defined just slightly differently, and they look at different factors. So I got into it at that point, and then I kind of fell in love with the whole thought of, how we are impacted by different parts of our personality and different things. And that's why I wrote the book on the personalities. And I've just joined a lot of networking groups and advisor groups and different things to just interact with other people who have similar interests.
And it's fascinating. I was reading something the other day. It was at Davos, the World Economic Forum, and they were just looking forward in terms of the skills that people will require by 2020, especially because of automation, AI, and robots and things. And it was interesting just seeing, obviously, actually creativity went from number 10 to number 3, which is the subject I speak on. But emotional intelligence, I think it was maybe in the top 3 or maybe the top 4. Actually it was higher than negotiation skills, for example. And I just thought that was just really interesting, because so many of those things that we think as being, maybe some of those kind of certain human skills, machines are going to be taking them, but those things like the emotional intelligence, the creativity, the empathetic listening, it's just, that's kind of the high level skills, which we're so far away from robots and AI being able to get there.
Well, I mean, soft skills in general are just so huge right now. I mean, you go to any conference and that's all they're talking about, and the ones I go to, at least, about how people are getting fired because they can't manage their emotions. They don't have great critical thinking, or a lot of the things that you're saying that it'll be hard to teach to computers, and as far as artificial intelligence and that type of thing. And I think it's hard enough with humans to get those things, because if you don't know what you don't know, and the people who need the help don't realize they need the help, and they're not really getting a lot of it in education or maybe at home, and then the corporations aren't really set up to train very well. So I could see why all those things are moving up the list.
It's such in your book as well, you hit on something which I see it all the time at conferences, speaking at conferences, because you're seeing more millennials coming into being the attendees, the participants of conferences now. So you see it there, and you definitely see it in organizations. But there's this difference of perception, outlook, I don't know the best way to explain it, between different generations in organizations as well. But because first maybe the thing I'd like to ask you about that is this new generation that's coming into business and into organizations. What makes this younger generation unique?
I think that they're more socially responsibly oriented. You know what I mean? They're thinking about what they can do to fix the world. What can they do differently? They're not as structured. They don't have to be there 9 to 5. They have a whole kind of a more calm approach. My generation, I'm a boomer. You better be there on time. You better punch in and punch out, and everything was very structured, and it's not like that anymore. I think we're going to see a lot of differences in that respect. I think you're seeing a lot more of buzzwords like tribe and like for teams and different things, it's going to be a lot more team oriented, not so me oriented for leaders, I think. What do you think?
No, I think it's interesting because most of my team are all young. They're all in the early 20s, and whenever someone, before they come onto our team, we have them do personality tests, assessments. And I find it really interesting. So I always think that those assessments, the ones we've used, that they only kind of tell you one level. They tell you about the personality thing, but most of them seem to completely miss the generational part.
That's very important. Yeah, that's an interesting thing, but it's also self-assessment too, and you get kind of interesting data from self-assessment because it's not necessarily accurate in all cases. It was interesting when I became certified to give the emotional intelligence EQI, and then I also did the MBTI, Myers-Briggs, and some other assessments to be certified in some of them. And it's not, when you do a self-assessment, it's what you think, right? And they build in these factors to try and catch you in case they say it different ways and multiple times and different, to try and make sure you're telling it the way you really see it. But I think you can kind of fudge some of the numbers on some of these things. So it's really challenging to get totally accurate information. But as far as generational things, that's like what I was saying on curiosity. Certain things we're just not able to measure that well yet. And I really think we need to be able to do more of that. But each generation is going to be different than the next. I mean, every generation has issues with the next generation, and I mean, I hear millennials complaining about Gen Z already, so you're going to get that in all age groups.
Yeah. So if you're a leader of an organization and you have maybe you have a team, they're across all different kind of generations, but you haven't maybe done any personality tests and any assessments that way, is that still a useful thing to do, to go through that with your team, or do you have to kind of do that but complement it with other things?
I definitely like the use of personality assessments. I do think they're helpful, but I think you have to factor in that they are self-assessments, and you have to look at it, give it with a grain of salt. But I think that you need them for baseline measurements in a lot of respects, especially emotional intelligence, because you kind of see, where are we now? Where can we go? What kinds of things? And a lot of these assessments give some great tips and tactics of how to improve. So I really think they're very important. I don't think that I don't really like the thought of using them to just like weed out people, like, oh no, you don't really fit. But I think just to get an idea of where they're coming from, I do like them from that respect. But I had to take personality tests to have jobs, even I can remember in 1980 taking one or was it maybe 85? It was in that time frame that I had switched over to another company, and they made us take them back then. And they were kind of ahead of their times with some of their things they were doing, I thought, that company. And it has always fascinated me. What I would have liked to have had them send me my results and why I guess I did okay, because I got the job.
I think I actually had one when I was at school. So I was about 13, and we were all given to do this personality test to find out what jobs would be best suited for us. And I seem to remember I got banking, like the most un-me type of job. So if they probably weren't that accurate at that point. So you're now into writing your fourth book. So when it comes to your kind of creativity, where do your ideas come from in terms of creating new keynotes, creating new books? Where do you go for inspiration?
Well, things like this. I mean, my radio show, talking to people like you, teaching my courses. I mean, every day I talk to amazing, interesting people. I mean, on my show, I have billionaires who are landing on the moon, and people that have all these amazing ways of looking at things. That it kind of there's never a day where I don't learn something from somebody, and that'll go, light bulbs will go off and go, well, wow, that's interesting. I mean, just talking to you about the generational things, and everything kind of sparks something that connects to something you're already doing, and you think, oh, well, I could maybe add this or to what I'm already doing, or I'm in a lot of great groups with other C-level executives. I'm in the C-suite. Advisors were on C-suite radio and different things, and all those people that you interact with in those kind of groups at Genius Network, I go to those kind of things. Yeah, they're all really just high-level individuals. I think if you associate with people who have done even more than you've done, it's really an important thing, because you go, oh, well, I hadn't even thought to shoot that high. In fact, at the recent Genius Network event I attended, that was the theme, because Naveen Jain was talking about landing on the moon this year, and the theme was, what's your moonshot? I mean, if you could do what you really want to do without your hands tied, what would it be? And to really think beyond, outside the box.
Yeah, that was interesting, because I listened to some of the actually, I think Joe Paul actually creates some of them as a podcast as well, some of those presentations, and they're really fascinating. I mean, I encourage any entrepreneur, any creative to go and listen to those. You can get them on iTunes and online. So the Genius Network. The one I heard was, and I'm trying to remember who it was. It was it was Peter Diamandis.
He's one, amazing.
And I can't remember, was interviewing almost like his coach, his mentor, whose name I've forgotten now. But it was just fascinating, because they were talking just
Dan Sullivan.
Dan Sullivan, that was it, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was just really fascinating, because I think it was, I had a guest on a while back called Warren Berger, and he said, the quality of, it's that thing of the quality of your life is the quality of your questions, is asking better questions. And I think finally what they were doing is they were asking better questions of themselves. And others, and it is one of the reasons why they were living life at a pretty, amazing level.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, and just talking to Naveen, I went to dinner with him the night before the Genius event, and he's just such a fascinating guy. He gave a lot of great perspective about why he doesn't limit himself. I mean, he'll go into an industry that he knows nothing about. Curing all disease, for example. He's not a doctor, and try to learn everything he can, and creates Viome, and he's all working on pathogens in the gut and that type of thing, and at the same time he's landing on the moon with Moon Express, and he just kind of recommended you just go into an industry you don't know and learn everything. You kind of go in with fresh eyes, and you don't have to unlearn what somebody else has taught you that might not be correct in the first place.
I guess it's that idea of, in Buddhism, for example, they talk about beginner's mind, or Zen, they talk about beginner's mind, kind of going in with those fresh eyes. It gives you a little bit of an advantage sometimes, because I know, having worked in other industries, by the time you get to 10 years in that industry, you're so close to it. It's difficult, really. And that's why I love working with millennials, younger generation, because they're coming in with a completely different mindset. And they kind of shake things up a little bit and make you look at things from slightly different perspectives.
Yeah, I love their lack of fear. I think we were taught to be more fearful in the boomer generation, like, don't lose all your money, don't do this, don't do that. But it's like, just do it kind of mentality for them. And I think that you get some boomers, some millennials, who fall into that. They don't do enough, and it drives people crazy. But most of them that I deal with really are very driven, and it's just in a different way. And they're just so open-minded. I love working with them as well.
So can you tell us about a time, the idea of fear? Is it a time in your life when you worked on something, you worked on a project, you gave it your heart and your soul, but it didn't quite work out like you'd hoped?
Well, boy, I don't really look at anything as a failure so much, or like that things might not have gone as I'd wanted. But I think that you learn so much from things that don't really, go as you had intended. And no one really wants to fail, but almost I find that if you have things that don't go well, you learn more. And I really found it interesting. I was at the Forbes CMO Summit last year, how much they were talking about failure, like not being a big deal. Like at my time, it was a big deal. You didn't want to fail ever. But they're using it more now as moments to, use as an educational training for their employees, instead of getting on their case and saying, look what you did, And so I think that that's really a great way of, I mean, of course, if they burn down the place from doing something stupid, that's a little different. But I'm saying, if you do have something that you look back on, you go, well, that didn't really work out. I mean, I've had a couple jobs. I'm thinking, why did I take that? Or what training sessions? Why did I do that? But everything you do is foundational to the next step. And I don't really see anything as a failure.
And I remember reading something that when you were at Forbes, I think towards the end of your time when you were doing the MBA Program Chair there, you had like a big, you were creating a big course and something that would normally take like 6 months. You had to compress it into like 2 weeks or something insane.
That was crazy.
So I'm interested in, are there any benefits to that? By having, we obviously think, okay, I don't have enough time to be able to do it. And obviously there's higher stress levels and maybe you don't get to do things exactly perfectly because you're compressed on the time. But I'm wondering if there's like, almost like, the 80-20 rule, you just have to get really focused on the 20% that it makes a difference.
Well, I don't know if you know Ford's sakes, but he always says done is better than perfect. And sometimes you can't get the time to do perfect, but you want to get close to that. You really do. For me, I work better under pressure. I mean, I had this professor when I was getting my doctorate who was a real slow moving kind of guy. And he was dedicated to making sure that everybody would have a hard time in his class, and it would take him a lot longer because he was going to put you through this horrible experience. And he was really a weird guy, and he got annoyed because I work really quickly, and I actually think better if I have less time to do something. If you make me drag it out, I lose my momentum, I think, and I like to do things in a pressure kind of situation. So he said, I would turn in my papers too quickly for his taste. And he said, you really need to spend more time. I think that you're missing all this opportunity if you would just put more effort into it. So I said, okay. And I wrote my paper in the same amount of time and then just held on to it for a couple of weeks and then submitted it. And then he said, see how much better that was? And it's just perspective of how much it takes you to do something. Some people's head would explode with the kind of things that I don't think are that big a deal, and maybe mine would for what wouldn't be a big deal to someone else. So it's kind of interesting to take a look at some of the pressures and time frames. But for me, I prefer to do things in a quicker way. But I mean, that was a really fast experience.
So you're a sprinter more than a marathon.
I am. I definitely am. Yeah. I mean, I'll hang in. I mean, I worked for a company for 20 years, so I mean, I'll hang in there. But for like projects, I don't like to drag things. I've been on more teams where they plan the plan to plan the plan, and all they do is have meetings about the next meeting, and that drives me insane. I need to get things done.
And in your life, this fascinating this creative journey that you've gone through in business and in academic side as well. Can you tell us about maybe a key insight or a light bulb moment in your life when you went, okay, this is the direction I want to be going with my work, or you made a key distinction that fundamentally changed things for yourself?
Well, I think that I've spoken with leaders in past jobs where they would tell me what their goal or their focus was, and I'm thinking, wow, that's not a good fit for me. You know what I mean? You just talk to somebody and they're going, this is what we see as the future for leadership. This is who we think is going to be our best people. And then you go, well, I don't think that that's really going to be a success. And in my mind, and that type of thing has made me leave jobs because I'm thinking, the culture, the just the overall goals just aren't what I have in mind. So I've had aha moments after speaking to people who have shared their vision, and I didn't agree with that for my overall goals and have moved on at those points.
And you shared with some great quotes with us actually already, but is there one quote that you kind of live by? Is your mantra?
Well, I like to underpromise and overdeliver. In sales, that's what they tell you all the time. So many people overpromise and underdeliver, and that drives me nuts. I like to be pleasantly surprised by what people can do, right? And I meet so many people that really don't do it, who just have a hard time determining how long something's going to take. And they just promise things that are impossible. They're just not really good at judging what they can do and how fast or when they can deliver it and what quality. I think it's really important to get a clear idea about setting deadlines and have incremental goals to make sure you stay on track and that you give people more than they're expecting.
And is there a resource or a tool or an app that you use? You mentioned kind of setting goals and delivering and schedules. Are the tools that you use that make your life easier and allow you to kind of stay on track, especially because I know you have lots of different projects on the go?
Well, I use Google for a lot of things, the Google Calendar and different things. I have so many apps I like that aren't so much for staying on track, but just in general. But as far as keeping organized, I do a lot of I put a lot of things on my calendar because I like to just kind of remember reoccurring things as well as because I have interviews all day just like you. You got to keep those there, and it just keeps me be more visual at looking at what my day's like to know, is this a reasonable amount of work or am I overloading it, right? But I have a lot of online resources I use for other things, social media tools and things, Canva, Camtasia, GarageBand, different things I really like. But for keeping organized, I another way I keep it organized running the MBA program was with Google Docs and Dropbox and some of those.
And then when it comes to you're in the stage of writing just now, are there particular apps that you're using? Because I'm sure you're absorbing you're researching at this stage, you're absorbing so much information and you're starting to write. What are the tools that you tend to use for those processes?
I tend to dictate sometimes into Word, or I type so fast because I was a secretary forever when I was young that I tend to like to keep things just in Word. I mean, I'm not really fancy when it comes to that because I tried some of those other, where you have them all over the place, and it just I'm very linear in my thinking, and it made me I spent more time trying to find things, and it it didn't really work for me. I like it pretty simple, so I'm a Word doc person. I know that's not very glamorous, but that's kind of what it is.
And if you could only recommend one book to our listeners, and also one record, one album, if there's one record that means a lot to you, what would that book and that record be?
Wow. You don't really listen to albums anymore, do we?
This is definitely a generational difference, because all my friends, the millennials, I asked them what's their album, the thing, and they say, well, it's this Spotify playlist I listen to, and so they don't think in terms of that's the change that's gone on in recent years.
I know. When I was young, I must have listened to Fleetwood Mac's album 100 times because that was the only thing that was popular, and you had to listen to every song back then because that's how it worked, right? But today, I love Ed Sheeran and some of his stuff. I loved his recent Perfect with Andre Bocelli. That might be my favorite right now. As far as books, of course, Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, Why You Can Matter More Than IQ, is a must. I like Susan Cain's Quiet a lot. And Kevin Cruz was on my show this week. I like a lot of his books. They're really simple and to the point, but that's the kind of books I like. I want somebody to tell me how to do it and cut out the fluff, and he does a great job.
So I'm going to I want you to imagine you woke up tomorrow morning and you have to start from scratch. You have all the tools of your trade, all the knowledge you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you and you don't know anyone. You have to restart. What would you do? How would you restart?
Oh, wow. That would be tough. But, you'd have to network, and my sales skills would be the thing to tie me in, right there, because I would know how to get around and meet people. But I really think a lot of people don't do enough networking. I think you'd have to really get into starting with talking to people through LinkedIn and different networks with, wherever your customers would be, if that's where they would be. And you would attend summits and connect with top thought leaders and just start to network, because you have to have that foundation, I think.
And it's fascinating because I know you've been involved in creating lots of courses. I've been involved in creating lots of online programs for different organizations and for myself as well. And as amazing as online is, we still have this need to connect in person, to have those experiences, which is why I'm quite confident for like people like you and I who's going to speak for a living that we're still going to have a job for a little while longer anyway.
I agree. I mean, you can only do so much online, and some of these events are amazing. And I hope that the one you speak at here in Scottsdale turns out really well. I'm sure it will. I think that there's so many wonderful networking events out there that people need to take advantage of it. What's out there to actually just get in front of people and meet, because it's just changed so much. You go to the gym, everybody's got their earphones on, they don't talk anymore. And I think those are good places to really just talk to people and in a one-on-one.
Well, Diane, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. What is the best way for people to connect with you, to learn more about the book, and to be able to, if they have other questions about personality and leadership and emotional intelligence, some of these things, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, I'm pretty much everywhere as Dr. Diane Hamilton. So that's just DrDianeHamilton. Just that is, I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn. I accept LinkedIn invitations. I am on Facebook, just about everywhere you can find that. But my website, drdianehamilton.com. And if you want to go specifically to the radio station, you can get there through that site. But you can just type in Dr. Diane Hamilton Radio. .com and get right to the radio station.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Diane, for coming on. I'm really looking forward to when the book comes out and reading all about curiosity and how curiosity works. And I wish you all the best in writing that book.
Well, thank you. It was so fun being on your show. I really appreciate it.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.